Hi, this video is trying to explain how we derive chord scales for minor key harmony, and with taking into account that sometimes we have chords from various different scales when we're using composite minor harmony. So the first thing to realize is that chord scales come from the source scale. So if you're borrowing a chord, if you're using a chord that exists in Aeolian or natural minor, then the notes for the chord scale are going to be taken from that and just reordered to create the chord scale. Remember, something like A natural minor or A Aeolian, that's a key scale. That's a scale that's being expressed in relation to a key, the key of A minor. But a chord scale is a scale that is relating to the root of the chord of the moment. All right, so say this was our piece of music. Okay, so right at this moment we're using an A minor 7. A minor 7 comes from natural minor. Most minor harmony comes from natural minor. So we can use the notes of A natural minor to go with our chord. And so the chord scale for this chord, 1 minor 7 in the key of A minor, is Aeolian or natural minor. And you can see A minor has no, A natural minor has no sharps and flats. So you can see that all the notes in this melody come from A natural minor, and so the chord scale would be A natural minor, or A Aeolian is actually the chord scale name for that scale. When we get to the G7, again, there's still no sharps and flats. That's because G7 is in fact diatonic to A natural minor, so we're still using the notes of A natural minor, but they're rooted on G now. So this scale would be called G something, and it turns out this scale is G Mixolydian. You would know that if you know your major scale chord scales, because they're the same in the relative minor, they're just in a different order. So if we were in the key of C, the relative major of C, G7 would get Mixolydian. Well, now that we're in A minor and it's no longer the 5 chord, it's now the flat 7 chord, it still gets Mixolydian. And again, as you can see, there's no sharps or flats, which proves that it comes from A natural minor. That's the source scale. A natural minor is the source scale, but the chord scale is G Mixolydian. When we get to our F major 7, well, again, still no sharps or flats. It's coming from another chord that is diatonic to natural minor. So we are using the same notes, but of course the chord scale is an F chord scale, and it turns out that when you start the scale of A minor on the note F, you get this scale, which is a Lydian chord scale. So the chord scale for flat 6 major 7 is F Lydian. Okay, then we get to E minor. Well, once again, E minor 7 is also diatonic to Aeolian, so we're going to be using the notes of Aeolian, but we're starting on E, and what do you get when you start A Aeolian on the note E? You get an E scale. Let's see what we get. We get this note is a minor second, so this is not this is a different kind of minor scale. What's the well-known minor scale that has a flat 2? 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. Hopefully you know that that scale is called Phrygian. Let's see what that sounds like. So it's a Phrygian chord scale. That's what you get. E Phrygian is the same notes as A Aeolian, but starting on the 5th scale degree, you get a Phrygian chord scale. What if we decided we wanted to use some composite minor harmony? We weren't satisfied with just staying entirely diatonic. So that would be our time to start exploring some of these other scales, like harmonic minor, melodic minor, Dorian. Now I'm not going to do every single possibility, but I'll just remind you that these scales have varying degrees of scale degree 6 and 7. So Aeolian has flat 6 and flat 7. They all have minor thirds, of course. But harmonic minor has the major 7, giving you the leading tone, giving you a 5 dominant chord. Why don't we use that? So we're going to make this chord, this 5 chord is now going to become a 5 dominant 7 by inserting a G sharp there. And then we have to do something with the melody to make it match. So we're taking harmonic minor. It's now A harmonic minor is our parent source scale. So we're taking the notes of A harmonic minor, which is A, B, C, D, E, F, G sharp to A. And so I'm going to change my melody to go with that. And I now have this. I now have the sound of a chord scale that goes with E dominant 7 instead of E minor 7. And the name of that scale would be E mixolydian flat 9, flat 13. If I were to write it out as a scale, of course it would be the notes of A harmonic minor. I'll write A harmonic minor first. And then I'll just simply take those notes and move them down. So I'm taking the notes, of A harmonic minor, but I've moved them down starting on E. And there I get this scale. 1, flat 9, 3, S4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. Or flat 13, I should say, flat 13. So mixo, flat 9, flat 13. And you get this sound. Okay, let's try another one. How about instead of having G7 here, what if we had G major 7 from Dorian down here? That means we're going to have an F sharp because Dorian has a major 6. And we'll just leave our A minor alone. Now we've got some different colors happening because we're using some different notes from composite minor. And where are chord scales coming from? Well, once again, they are coming from the source scale. Where does flat 7 major 7 come from? It comes from Dorian, A Dorian. That's an A minor scale with an F sharp in it. And that's what we've done in our melody. And if you wanted to hear the whole scale, you write it out here. Oops. It's the same idea. The chord scale is just coming from the source. It's just that we're not going to start on A. I'm starting on A right now to show you what the source is. Oops. But I'm then going to move the notes to start on G. Okay, so that's A Dorian. The source was A minor, but now the same notes as A Dorian, rather, but starting on G, and that gives us a 1, T9, 3, 4, S4, 5, T13, major 7. So that gives us an Ionian chord scale. Same as you can see in the melody there. Now I might adapt the melody because I don't want to have that S4 right on the downbeat. So I might do something like, that's an example, right? What's the chord scale for flat 7, major 7? It comes from Dorian. It comes from A Dorian, but when we reorder the notes on G, we realize that those notes spell out a G Ionian chord scale. So that's as far as I'm going to go. This video is really to show you how the chord scales are derived. Memorizing them, figuring them out, and then memorizing them is another task. That's something where I have some charts and things available where you can look up any chord scale. Hopefully that will be helpful. By the way, there are secondary dominants in minor key, and their chord scales, just like major key secondary dominants, are diatonic except for the chord tones themselves, and the rest of the notes are diatonic, usually to Aeolian, and that gives you the chord scale. So for example, if we were to use A7, 5, 7 of 4 right here. First of all, I would spell the chord with a C sharp because that's a chord tone that I would need. And then my chord scale would include all the notes of A natural minor, except I would have a C sharp. So we would essentially be doing, creating a scale based on A, that's diatonic except for the one necessary non-diatonic note that's a chord tone. And that gives us a chord scale starting on A that is mixo, that's a major ninth, and a flat 13, so it would be mixo flat 13. Now it's not uncommon in minor keys to add a B flat there because that flat 9 corresponds to the flat 6 of the target chord. We're going to a D minor here. And if we were actually in the key of D minor, we would have a B flat in that key signature. So sometimes we put in that flat 9 to sort of make it sound even more like we're going to D minor, even though we're not there long enough to establish the new key. So the flat 9 on this chord is optional, but it's quite commonly used. But the other notes are always used. You always have, the flat 13, and you always have the S4. And so if we were going to use the B flat, then I would change this melody note to a B flat, of course, and we would get something that sounds like this. Okay, and we're getting that natural, again, predominantly diatonic sound on the secondary dominant with a few necessary non-diatonic notes to create that dominant chord sound.